Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rishi Uvacha. Iti tasam swasaktinam satinam asametyasa prasuptaloka tantranam nisamya gatim ishvaraha.
Sushil Prabhu? Sushil Prabhu?
Okay. Hare Krishna Master. Sorry, my son. Rishi Mitra said the son just heard about the suspension of the progressive creative functions of the universe due to the non-combination of these potencies, such as the Mahatattva.
Text 2.
Which one?
Kalasanjnam tada devim vibhrak chaktim urukramah त्रयोविंशति तत्त्वानां गमनं युगपद् अविसत्.
Hello?
Hare Krishna.
Okay. The supreme powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all different elements.
Text 3. No pravisto bhagavam jesta rupena tam ganam binam samyojayam asa suptam karma prabodhayan.
Just when the personality God had entered into the elements by his energy, all the living entities were enlivened into different activities, just as one who is engaged in his work after awaking from sleep.
Text 4. Prabhuta karma devena trayovinsa Satikogdinaha prerito nayat swabir matrabir adipurisan.
When the 23 principal elements were set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form or Vishwarupa body of the Lord came to existence.
Text 5. Parena visatasvasmin matraya visvasvargnaha chakshobhanyo nyam asadya yasmin lokas characharaha.
As the Lord in his punchy portion entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into gigantic form in which all planetary systems, all movable and immovable creations rest.
Text 6. Hiranmaya sapurusa sahasra परिवत्सरन् अन्धकोश उवा सप्सु परम बृंहिता.
The gigantic Ratapusa, known as Hiranmaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him.
Text 7. सा वै विश्वासजां गर्भो देवकर्मात्मशक्तिमान् विभाभजत्मनात्मानम् एकदा दशदा.
The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of gigantic Vishwarupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life activity and the self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively.
Text 8. ऐसे अशेष सत्त्वानाम् आत्मंसा परमात्मनः अद्योवातर यत्रासौ भूतग्रमो विभाव्यते.
The gigantic universal form of the Supreme Lord is the first incarnation and planetary portion of the Supersoul. He is the self of a limited number of divinities, and in him invests the aggregate creation which thus flourishes.
Text 9. Satyatma Sadidevascha Sadibhuta iti trida Virat Prano Dasavida Ekada Hridayena cha.
The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1 in the sense. He is the body, the mind, and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy, and he is the one heart where life energy is generated.
Text 10. Smaran Visvasajamisho Vidnapitam Adoksajaha Virajam Atapat Svena Teja Saisam Virtaye.
The Supreme Lord is a superstar of all the demigods, entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for the understanding.
Text 11. Atha tasya tasya kadidhaya tananiha nirabhidyanta devanam tani me gataha shanu.
Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of demigods after the manifestation of a gigantic universal form."
Text 12. Tasyagne asyam nirbhinam
Secondly, or to support
palo
the guru
visattadam vachasvam
and
sen
all the directors of
yam
material affairs
yaya sau
into
pratipad
it and in their respective positions.
Ugly or heat separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it, into their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words.
Text 13. Nirbinam talu varuno lokapalo visaddhare जीवायम सेन चारसम यायसौ प्रतिपाद्यते.
When the palate of the gigantic form was separated, Varunia, the director of the water in the planetary system, entered therein, and thus the living entity has entered the faculty to taste everything with his tongue.
Text 14. Nirbine asvinau nase Vishnur avisatam padam grane namsena gandhasya pratipatiryato bhavet.
When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the dual Ashwini Kumars entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, living entities can smell the aromas of everything.
Text 15. Nirbine aksinitvasta lokapalo visadvibo chaksusamsena rupanam pratipatiryato bhavet.
Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun and the director of light entered them with the partial representation of eyesight, and thus the entities can have vision of forms.
Text 16. Nirbinani asya charmani lokapalo visad pranenam sena samsparsam yesa no pratipadyate.
When there were a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directed the wind and entered with partial touch, and thus the divinities can realize tactile knowledge.
Text 17. Karnavasya vinirbhinau tisnyam swam vivissurdisa srotrenam sena saptasya siddhim yena prapadyate.
When the ears of gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles by which all the entities hear and take advantage of sound.
Text 18. Tvachamasya vinirvinam vivisurdisnyam osade amstena roman pi kandam yayasur pradipadite.
When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of sensation and the living parts entered into it, and thus the living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch.
Text 19. Medram tasya vinirvinam svadisnyam ka upavisat retasam sena yena sav anandam pradipadite.
When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen. Thus, the living entities can enjoy sexual pleasure.
Text 20. Gudampam sa vinirbinam mitro loke sa avisat payunam sena yesanav visargam pradipadyate.
The evacuating channel separately became manifest, and the director, named Mitra, entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus, the limited are able to pass stool and urine.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sushil Prabhu and Jyoti Mataji, for your lovely recitations. Welcome, dear devotees, to our first chat session of the year 2025. Happy New Year to everyone. I wish you all a blessed New Year, with everyone making spiritual advancement, and in particular, increasing our affection for Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is not different from Lord Krishna, and anyone who connects with the Bhagavatam is connecting with Krishna. And the goal of everything we do in all our spiritual life is to please Krishna. Krishna is certainly pleased when he sees the living entities having an affinity to hear about him and chant about him and to discuss about him. So this particular activity of coming together to read, discuss, and chant the ocean of Srimad Bhagavatam is very pleasing to Lord Krishna. So it's my honor and privilege to be part of this group, which has been existing for a long time now. I think it's over 2020, so close to 5 years now. First Bhagavad Gita and then into Srimad Bhagavatam. So today we'll continue with our reading and discussion of the 6th chapter of the 3rd canto. And the title of this chapter is Creation of the Universal Form.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. We are unable to see you.
Unable to see me. Okay.
That's right. Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. Not
That's better. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we'll start up with the Mangala Charanam prayers, and then we'll move on to discussions of text numbers 9 and 10. Om Jnanatimmirandasya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Astacha Dishatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, let me share my screen. First, let's share the verses. So this is text number 9. Hopefully you can see it on your screen. Sajatma Sadi Devascha Sadi Bhuta Iti Tradha Virat Prano Dasabhidha Ekadha Hridayena Cha. So the word for word synonyms. Let me just move this way. Sa Adhyatma, the body and mind with all the senses. Sa Adideva, the controlling demigods of the senses. Cha and Sa Adibhuta, the present activities. Iti, thus, Trida, three. Virat, gigantic. Pranaha, moving force. Dhas, Vidaha, 10 kinds. Ekadha, one only. Hridayena, living entity. Living energy, Cha also. Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1 in the sense that he is the body and the mind and the senses. He is the dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy. And he is the one heart where life energy is generated. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 7, 4, and 5, it is stated that the 8 elements, earth, water, fire, air, sky, mind, intelligence, and false ego, all products of the Lord's inferior energy. Whereas the living entities who are seen to utilize the inferior energy originally belong to the superior energy, the internal potency of the Lord. The 8 inferior energies work grossly and subtly, whereas the superior energy works as the central generating force. This is experienced in the human body. The gross elements, namely earth, etc., form the external gross body and are like a coat, whereas the subtle mind and false ego act like the inner clothing of the body. The movements of the body are first generated from the heart, and all the activities of the body are made possible by the senses, powered by the 10 kinds of air within the body. The 10 kinds of air are described as follows. The main air passing through the nose in breathing is called prana. The air which passes through the rectum as evacuated bodily air is called apana. The air which adjusts the foodstuffs within the stomach and which sometimes sounds as belching, is called samana. The air which passes through the throat, and the stoppage of which constitutes suffocation, is called the udan air. And the total air which circulates throughout the entire body is called the vyana air. Subtler than these 5 airs, there are others also. That which facilitates the opening of the eyes, mouth, etc. is called naga air. The air which increases appetite is called krikara air. The air which helps contraction is called kurma air. The air which helps relaxation by opening the mouth wide in yawning is called devadatta air. And the air which helps sustenance is called the Nanjana Jaya air. All these airs are generated from the center of the heart, which is only one. This central energy is superior energy of the Lord, which is seated within the heart with the soul of the body, which acts under the guidance of the Lord. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita 15:15 as follows. Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishto matasmriti jnanam apohanam cha vedascha sarvai aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavid eva chaham. The complete central force is generated from the heart of the Lord, who is seated there and who helps the conditioned soul in remembering and forgetting. The conditioned state is due to the soul's forgetfulness of his relationship of subordination to the Lord. Those who want to continue to forget the Lord is helped by the Lord to forget him, birth after birth. But one who remembers him by dint of association with a devotee of the Lord is helped to remember him more and more. Thus, the conditioned soul can ultimately go back home, back to Godhead. This is the process of transcendental help by the Lord. This process of transcendental help by the Lord is described in the Bhagavad Gita 10:10 as follows. Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. The Buddhi Yoga process of self-realization with intelligence transcendental to the mind devotional service can alone elevate one from the conditioned state of material entanglement in the cosmic construction. The conditioned state of the living entity is like that of a person who is within the depths of a huge mechanical arrangement. The mental speculators can reach the point of Buddhi Yoga after many, many lifetimes of speculation. But the intelligent person who begins from the platform of intelligence above the mind makes rapid progress in self-realization. Because the Buddhi Yoga process entails no fear of deterioration or retrogression at any time, it is guaranteed path of self-realization as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 240. Let's just see what 240 is. Neha vikrama nashosti pratyavayo navidyate swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mato bhayat. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. The mental speculators cannot understand that the two birds, Sveteshvatara Upanishad, sitting in one tree are the soul and the super soul. The individual soul eats the fruit of the tree, while the other bird does not eat the fruit, but only observes the activities of the bird. Without attachment, The witnessing bird helps the fruit-eating bird perform fruitful activities. One who cannot understand this difference between the soul and the supersoul, or God and the living entities, is certainly still in the entanglement of the cosmic machinery, and thus must await the time when he must be free from bondage. Hare Krishna. So there's a lot's been packed in here, and it's done in a certain context. This chapter is called The Creation of the Universal Form. And the first part of this chapter, the first 10 verses, is about the development of the gigantic universal form. So just put this into context, what we're discussing now, how this universal form is being formed. Let's just take one step back and look at, oh Krishna, where is my PowerPoint now? Just give me 1 minute. Hopefully you can see what I have on the screen. So you remember in the previous chapter, we were discussing, or Maitreya Muni was discussing to Vidura about the process of creation. And he discussed various aspects of the creative process. But the chapter ends with the description of the different elements, the 10 senses, knowledge acquiring senses, the 10 gross matters, 5 tanmatras, 5 elements, 10 senses and the intelligence. And then we discussed how each of these elements as a controlling deity. And then we discussed the prayers of each of these deities towards God Vishnu. That we were discussing in the last chapter. And we concluded the chapter with the demigods acknowledging that each of these elements in and of itself, they cannot really serve the ultimate purpose. So they all have to be combined. They have to be combined. And just like this body we have, the body is made up of earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego, so many aspects, life airs, and so on. So at a certain stage, water is there, earth is there, air is there, and so on. But they are separate. They are not combined. So they need to be combined to be effective. So the Lord, hearing the prayers of the different devatas, seeing the elements in the unmixed state, he sends what is called his Bhibrat Shakti, or the cohesive energy, which amalgamates all the elements and forms a golden universal egg. This is what we've been discussing in this chapter. The golden universal egg, like a fetus, with all the living entities, resided for 1,000 celestial years on the Karana ocean. So we have this golden universal egg, together with all the living entities, lying in the ocean. And then the Lord, as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, he enters the ocean, the universal egg, so to speak, and the Lord gives it life. And all the living entities, including the devatas, were enlivened as if being awakened from a sleep. So the Virat Purusha differentiated into the functioning universe consisting of 3 Shaktis, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3, respectively. Now, for an ordinary universe living entity, it's very difficult to conceive of the personal form of the Lord. So we discussed previously that this first aspect of the Lord, to help such living entities to understand the personal aspect of the Lord, is described as the universal form. This is an imaginary form, and in one sense it's also a temporary form. As we discussed in the second canto, the trees, and the different types of life is of the body, the rivers are like the blood flowing through the body of the Lord, and so on. So here in this chapter, we are describing again and discussing, very similar to what we discussed in the second canto, the universal form of the Lord, but a little more details are given. So in this particular verse, verse number 9, you see it's mentioned there, 1, 3, and 10. That the gigantic universal form is represented by 1, 3, and 10. So what is the 1, 3, and 10? Srila Prabhupada actually gives us an amazing description of each of these aspects in the purport, which maybe we can touch on. It's already 18 minutes past. But anyway, at least let's get a bird's eye view of what's being discussed here. So the 3 is, as mentioned in this verse, Adhyatma, Adideva, and Adibhuta. So what is Adideva? Adhyatma, sorry. Adhyatma are the subtle senses. What are the subtle senses? Mind, intelligence, and ego. Adideva is the controlling devatas of the different senses. Each of the senses we have has a controlling devata. And Adibhuta is the gross organs along with the sense objects. Like the body, we have the gross organs, various organs, and then we have the sense object, the senses of the sense objects. Then there's the 10. And Prabhupada explains very beautifully what is a 10 here. And the 10 is described as the 10 kinds of life energy or life airs within the body. And they are enumerated as prana, the life air through the nose, which is breathing. If that's not taking place, breath is not there, then one dies. Apana is through the rectum as evacuated bodily air. If too much of gas and air accumulates in the body, it causes all sorts of complications and diseases. So that's one of the air that's passed through the rectum, and that's called apana. And then within the body, for the functioning of the body, there's foods in the stomach, and there's a certain life air called belching. One Srila Prabhupada was taking prasad, and after he had taken prasad, he belched, or what sometimes we call burp, and Prabhupada said, accepted. Food was accepted. Then is udana, through throat. There's a life air that goes, and when this stops, we suffocate. You see some people that happens, they suffocate. They get something that gets stuck in the throat. There's no movement of the air, and then they suffocate. Then demigod Vyana, the total air circulating through the body. This whole movement of the air within the body that keeps the body in constitution. Therefore, in Ayurveda, the doctor feels the pulse, and then he can feel through the different types of kapha, vata, vayu. Naga, facilitating opening of eyes and mouth. If there's no circulation of the air, won't be able to open the mouth. Sometimes it happens, people want to say something, but they can't. Same with the eyes. And this Kikara increases appetite, Kurma increases contraction, Devata helps relaxation, and the Nanja helps sustenance. And when I was reading this, I was thinking, how scientific is the Vedic knowledge? There's so many things that are happening within the body that we just take for granted. That's happening. Only sometimes when we get sick, we go see to the doctor, and the doctor does something to address these different imbalances in the life phase in the body. So let's see, maybe go back to the waiting for time. 22 minutes past. Okay, let's just leave it at that for now. Just an overview of the verse, because we have to cover 10 too. And if we get time, we'll go back and we'll just dissect the purport a bit more. But let's just try first to cover what we are meant to be covering in this class, in today's session. So let me go back to this verse now and go to verse number 10. And then we can come back. Okay. I'm juggling so many things here. Okay, text number 10. Smaran Vishwasrijamisho Vigna Pitam Adokshajaha Virajam Atapatsvena Tejasayam Viritaye. Synonyms: Smaran, remembering, Vishwasrijam, of the demigods entrusted with the task of cosmic construction. Isha, the Supreme Lord. Vigna Pitam, as he was prayed for. Adokshajaha, the transcendence. Virajam, the gigantic universal form. Atapat, considered thus. Swena, by his own. Tejasa, energy. Esham, for them. Vivritaye, for understanding. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord is the super soul of all the demigods entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself, and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding. This is very interesting, that they pray to the demigods, pray to the Lord to understand creation, and also to invoke the combining of the ingredients, and the Lord to enlighten them in this respect. He manifested, it said here, the gigantic form for their understanding. Purport. Anyone likes to read the first stanza, and then some on the next, and some on the last one?
I'll do, Prabhu.
Yes, please, Yoshil Prabhu.
The impersonalists are captivated by the gigantic universal form of the Supreme. They think that the control behind this gigantic manifestation is imagination. Intelligent persons, however, can estimate the value of the cause of observing the wonders of the effects. For example, the individual human does not develop from the womb of the mother independently, but because the living entity, the soul, within the body, is within the body. Without the living entity, a material body cannot automatically take shape or develop. When an material object displays development, it must be understood that there is a spiritual soul within the manifestation. The gigantic universe has developed gradually. Just as the body of a child develops, the conception that the transcendence enters with the universe. Therefore, logical, as the materialists cannot find the soul and the super soul within the heart. Similarly, for want of sufficient knowledge, they cannot see that the supreme soul is the cause of the universe. The Lord is therefore described in the Vedic language as Aran Manasya Gochara, beyond the conception of words and minds.
Thank you, Sushil Prabhu. Anyone for the next one? Or the next two?
May I read?
Yes, Mataji, please, Chetna.
Due to a poor fund of knowledge, the mental speculators try to bring the Supreme within the purview of words and minds, but the Lord refuses to be so intelligible. The speculator has no adequate words or mind to gauge the infinity of the Lord. The Lord is called Adokshaja, or the person who is beyond perception by the blunt, limited potency of our senses. One cannot perceive the transcendental name or form of the Lord by mental speculation. The mundane PhDs are completely unable to speculate on the Supreme with their limited senses. Such attempts by the puffed up PhDs are compared to the philosophy of the frog in the well. A frog in a well was informed of the gigantic Pacific Ocean, and he began to puff himself up in order to understand or measure the length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean. Ultimately, the frog burst and died. The title PhD can also be interpreted as plough department, a title meant for the tillers in the paddy field. The attempt of the tillers in the paddy field to understand the cosmic manifestation and the cause behind such wonderful work can be compared to the endeavor of the frog in the well to calculate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Can
Last.
I, Prabhuji?
Yes, please, Mataji.
The Lord can reveal himself only to a person who is submissive and who engages in his transcendental loving service. The demigods controlling the elements and the ingredients of the universal affairs prayed to the Lord for guidance, and thus he manifested his gigantic form as he did as at the request of Arjuna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. In one sense, this verse can be summarized in the last sentence of Prabhupada. You know, the whole purport is about trying to understand the Lord. One cannot understand the Lord with one's blunt material senses. Ata Sri Krishna Namadhi na prayat kriyam indriya sevan mukhi ijivado swayam evati spurati adaha. We cannot understand the Lord. We cannot understand the creation. Firstly, Prabhupada says, you know, we cannot understand it by simple logic, but we can just understand it by understanding of the material principles. In the Prabhupada gives the example of the human body. There is no example in the history of creation of a tiny group of cells from the womb developing into a fully manifested body of a baby with all of the organs and the senses and so on. There is no example. But there is an example, or there is constant knowledge that there is development of a body taking place within the body of a mother, where the mother is supplying all the necessities for the development of the body. So in the same way, just like a living entity in the material body cannot develop or take shape on its own, we can understand the various ingredients, the various parts of the universe, that this is not just happening by some chance. There is just no such experience in this world. So one cannot understand that this development of the universe. Prabhupada firstly said this universe just didn't happen like that. In a flash, everything was there. It took place, although it can do so by the will of the Lord, but it all takes place through the Lord's plan, as we read and discuss in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a process, and this process, Prabhupada says, the gigantic universe is developed gradually, just as the body of a child develops. The conception that the transcendence enters within the universe is therefore logical. It's logical. And Prabhupada says that this cannot be understood by the blunt material senses, not with a PhD or anything. I have a friend who's got a PhD in physics, and he was telling me that when you do a PhD, you have to take one tiny portion, one fragment of knowledge, and then you go deeply into it and you try to expand it in the form of a PhD thesis. So when these PhD scientists, they do their dissertations or their theses, they study one very small part of the creation. They don't study everything else. It's just absolutely too vast. It's humanly impossible for one to get PhD. I mean, if you take how many PhDs are in this world today, thousands, tens of thousands of PhDs, and all of them know very little fraction of knowledge. And they do not know how the other aspects, the other PhDs that are out in the world connect with their PhD. They just don't know that because they are so limited. Just like Prabhupada gives the example of Dr. Frog. He was in the well. One day someone came and told him that there's an ocean. And with his limited knowledge of his well, he wanted to understand how big the ocean is. Is the ocean, he puffed himself, twice as big as my pond? Is the ocean 4 times as big as my pond? Is it 10 times as big? And eventually he puffed himself and he exploded. Because he was trying to understand the ocean relative to his limited experience of his pond. And it was just a crazy endeavor to do that. Therefore, Prabhupada says these PhDs trying to understand, as Prabhupada so beautifully expresses it, try to bring the supreme within the purview of words and minds. But it's impossible. And what does Krishna says? It's impossible to understand him. But Bhakti Mam Abhijanati, only by undivided devotional service can we understand him. And this is so beautiful. Krishna is saying, it's impossible to understand me. But if you love me, because that's what devotional service means, you're always serving Krishna with love, you're performing devotional service, Krishna being pleased with us, he can reveal everything. And Krishna says, one who understands me, the transcendental nature of my appearance and disappearance, does not, upon quitting this body, take birth again. One understands Krishna, doesn't take birth again. So in one sense, the Lord is making understanding. There are some people who just cannot project their minds to the point where they can understand the personal feature of Krishna is two-armed, threefold bending form of Shyamasundara playing on his flute. People, their mind cannot reach that far. So Krishna says, okay, you start off by understanding my form, my potency, how I am responsible is due to my energies, that everything is moving. Try to understand it through the medium of the Virat Rupa, the universal form. Start off there. And it's interesting that Maitreya and Vidura, two great personalities, their discussion is starting from this point or progressing from this point. That it's a gradual process of understanding. We can't firstly quickly jump to the 10th canto. We go through each of these cantos to further our knowledge, to increase our purification, while at the same time performing devotional service to the Lord, and everything will be revealed to us. Okay, obviously there's so much to be said about both purports and verses, but I think for today we shall stop here. If anyone's got any questions, reflections or comments, please unmute yourself and ask or express.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. There is one question on the child, on the
Okay. Okay, let me have a look. Let me stop sharing. Chat.
shall I read it?
Yes.
Is apana and samana in a temple considered an offense?
I don't know if we can term it an offense. It's etiquette. Just like in the presence of a superior, we don't do certain things because it just may show some lack of respect. So in the nectar of devotion, Srila Rupa Goswami lists the 64 principles of sadhana bhakti. And among those principles, the do's and the don'ts, he lists apana as one of the don'ts. So, yeah, and even samana, again, it's not considered to be very, very dignified in the temple room. But I wouldn't say it's a particular offense. It is just maybe not expressing full respect. Is that okay? So, Srila Prabhu? Okay. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Jyoti, for reminding me and repeating the question. Anyone else got any questions, comments, reflections? Wants to share any aspirations they have for the studying and reading of Bhagavatam? No?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
I just can't understand how the separate part was formed, where the eyes were sitting, where the ears were sitting, the separate form of the Virat Rupa. Please, can you explain it a bit more? Please.
Sorry, Mataji, I didn't quite understand your question. Can you repeat it?
As it says, the separate part of the Virat Rupa was formed, like eyes were separately formed, nose, nostrils, and ears. This is separately formed.
Yes.
How was done like that? I can't understand much. Where the part was kept, like where the eyes were kept, where the nostrils were kept,
Oh, okay.
ears were kept, and then they
Prabhupada actually gives
together, then put it together.
Yeah, Prabhupada actually explains it like, if you, like just take within our own experience the form of a baby, the ovum and the sperm of the father unite,
Yeah.
and there's the increasing of the cells.
Mhm.
So just from that group of cells, gradually with time, there was no year. If you look within the cells, yeah, it's all within the DNA, the genetic code, that with time, miraculously, we cannot even understand it, but it just, with time, it all gradually manifests. So the same way, like how the body of the baby is formed, the eyes, where did the eye come from? How did the fully formed eye develop? How did the fully formed ear develop?
Yeah.
It's time. And actually, if we think about
9
it,
months.
it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Yeah.
And in one sense, it's all hidden within the genetic code. The code supplies the information for the same way. So in the same way, it's like the Virat Rupa of the Lord. It's an imaginary form. It's a material form. But by the Lord's energy, like at one stage, there were no seas, there were no mountains.
Okay.
How did they develop? They developed by the Lord's arrangement, by his energy, not by chance. So personally, I would say it's very difficult to understand, but when we try to understand it in the context of the Lord's energy, the Lord's plan, and the Lord revealing that knowledge of how it's done at his own will, then we become peaceful. Whereas others, they can spend lifetime after lifetime and they wouldn't understand it. So I don't know if it answered your question, Mataji, but that's my layman's response to your question. If anyone else likes to add to what I just said, please feel free.
So that means it took a long time to perform the Virat Rupa.
According to Srila Prabhupada's purport, the Lord did it in stages, yes.
Oh, Krishna, okay.
But just remember, Mataji, this Virat, it's an imaginary form. It's an imaginary form. It's a material form just for our understanding. It's not like a physical form, but we can liken it.
But we can see it like physical form.
Yes,
Yeah.
like the world took some place. The mountains, which are part of the Virat Rupa of the Lord, according to the description in the Bhagavatam. It happened that there was a volcanic eruption, and then these mountains formed and so on.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay. I think
Thank you very much.
we call it a day there. I think some of you all may be going back to work after a nice break. Think of Krishna. Whatever we do, try to remember Krishna. Try to remember what we read in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavatam today. Everything that's happening in the body. Like it said, the heart. Sorry, I discussed the 10. I never came to the 1. The 1 is the heart. And Prabhupada says, the Lord is like the heart. Within the heart of the heart, the human heart is the super soul. And that's the Lord. And from there, all the energy, all of the direction is coming.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji,
Patitanam
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda ki Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. All right. Bye-bye.